Okay, now the final thing to model would be the scissors. So I've brought up the set for scissors group and created a new scissors mesh item in the top tools group. Now we're going to take a quick look at it before we model it. Now within this reference group we actually have two other groups. We have scissors main and scissors all. Scissors all is pretty much what you can see now. It's the red part, which is the main arm of the scissor that connects to the penknife itself, and the green arm, which sits next to it and kind of pivots around this yellow hinge here. Now what you can do is click the eye next to the scissors all layer, and we can just see the scissors main segment, so just the red bit, and it is a very awkward looking shape actually. I don't know whether or not it would be best to really model this using subdivision surfaces or not. I'm going to try it without. We're going to take a look and see how easy it is, if we come across any problems, and then if we get hideously stuck, we're going to start using subdivision surfaces to model a couple of different parts of it. So to begin with our scissors layer selected, we're going to go to the basic tab and click on the pen tool. I'm going to come down to in here and start clicking out some of these points. Now initially it starts off pretty easy, it's not too bad, and then we get some crazy stuff. So I'm going to put a point here on the transition between a straight line and the curve. Then let's think about this. I'm going to put a point there which is following the line at the start of this curve, and also if you think that about here is the point where this curve and this curve joins together, so it's kind of in between there somewhere, but we might have to tweak this around quite a little bit. I'm going to try it anyway, so I'll put another one there and one around about there and one there, like so. So we'll see how well this goes, and then we'll carry on, put a point there, and then this bit isn't too bad, so we've got a single point, I'm gonna say about there, actually put it back a bit. So if you follow the start of this curve here and this curve here, you kind of end up about there, I think. So first of all, we're going to bevel this one. So select this vertice, hit B for vertex bevel, right click and drag out. Now so far so good. I'm going to bring back our visibility options, show vertices, just so we can see the end there. I'm going to make it so that it's a nice even spacing between these end verts. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Then I missed out a little bit here, but we can go back in and do that in a second. I'm going to bevel this top object, so select that guy, B for bevel, right click, and down we go. Okay, so far so good. That doesn't look terrible. This is okay. So what I'm going to do now is, you can see here that this vert is not equally spaced between this one and this one. So what I'm going to do is grab this guy and I'm going to move it to the left slightly, just so we get a nice evenly spacing, kind of even spacing between the other verts that surround it. I'm going to do the same over here. I'm just going to move it slightly to the right and maybe up just a little. And with that done, I'm going to select both of these guys, B for bevel, right click, I'm going to drag out an edge bevel and see how that looks. Now this one on the right looks better than this one on the left, so I'm going to do them both separately. So I'm going to deselect this one on the left, and just with this one on the right selected, I'm going to re-bevel it, and I'm going to put that down to a round level of 2. And I'm going to put it to about there. Looks pretty good. So fairly evenly spaced vertices around there. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So I'm going to do the same on this. I'm going to move it down ever so slightly, like so, and then try and bevel it again and see if we can get something a little bit better this time. So around about there, I think, is pretty good. So fairly happy with that actually. So we've got this section here all good. This curve now looks pretty nice actually. And then this part is all good, and then we've obviously got a couple of problems in here. So what I'm going to do is basically with the edge slice tool, I'm just going to come in and cut a couple of extra verts into place. So I'm going to drag an edge right in the middle of the poly, so not along an existing edge, to about there. and then into the corner. We're going to ignore this section for a little bit. I'm going to bring this back down to there, and then finally along to there. And I'm going to grab this polygon and delete it. And then we can come in and tweak these verts a little bit if needed. So something like that looks pretty good. I'll then bevel this guy with a round level of 2 to about there. And what I'm going to do, actually I will take that a little bit further. So yeah, about there. This vert's probably in the middle of this kind of opening there. So that's okay. I'm then going to bevel this guy. Maybe not with a round level that big, so maybe 1 in there. Like so. And then I'm going to come over and bevel this guy with a round level of 2. Right click and bevel. And space to drop the tool, and we actually have a pretty good representation of that shape, as weird as it looks. So what do we do now? Well, we need to do a couple of things actually. The first thing I'm going to do is take a look at creating this inset shape here. With that done, we can then inset it and give it some width. So what I'm going to do is try and separate this section from the rest of the mesh. So I'm going to draw an edge from the right hand side of this corner to the top, and from the left hand side of here to the top. In fact, I might just put in an extra edge just there, like so. And that means we kind of get this section here where we're going to be dealing with adding in this circular thing that we've got going on here. So what I'm going to do is come down to the new item and create a new mesh layer. We're going to use this as some kind of stencil with which we can kind of print a circular shape onto our existing scissors mesh. So in the basic tab, I'm going to click on the cylinder tool, and starting in the middle of that circle, I'm going to draw out a shape like that. And I think 16 is pretty good actually. That's not such a bad size. So we want both of the radiuses to be the same. So 800 looks pretty good, and once you're happy with its position, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Now I want to grab that guy, and we're going to move it ever so slightly out in front of this mesh. Now I'm going to go back to the right view, and what we're going to do is create this little section that runs out here. So I'm going to use the edge extend tool. I'm going to extend it out slightly, and then scale it down a little bit on the y-axis. And then I'm going to scale it out again with the edge extend tool, like so. So this is the shape that we're looking for. It's like we've got a little bit of a bevel there, and then we come out past the edge of our scissors. Now what we're going to do is extrude this so that it runs through the entire scissors model. So it's gone in one side and out the other side. And with this in place, we can use a tool over here in the Mesh Edit tab called the Solid Drill. Now to do that, we need to set up our scene somewhat. So I'm just going to make sure that everything else is turned off for a second. In fact, I'm going to keep our scissors group on and turn off our all refs group. And we've got to make sure that the only things active are our scissors and our mesh layer, which is the one that is going to be doing the cutting. We want our layer that's going to be cut to be the one that is currently selected, and the cutting layer to be visible but unselected in the background. And when we do that, if we come to our Mesh Edit tab and go down to Solid Drill, we bring up this option box here. Now we have a couple of operations we can choose from. We have Core, Tunnel, Stencil, and Slice. And the one that I use a whole bunch, really often actually, is the Stencil tool. Now if you select it, you can see that the cutting mesh is currently set to background, and the background layer at the moment is the mesh, which is this cutting item. And if we click OK and then hide our mesh, you'll see that we have basically imprinted that shape onto our scissors object. And this is really good because it doesn't kind of cut holes in your mesh, it just gives you edges that are cut onto it with which you can kind of move them around, you can kind of, change anything up. And I find it a lot quicker and easier than a Boolean operation, which tends to be something where you kind of core out an object, or you cut out an object using another one. And so Stencil is one of my favorite tools within Modo. Now that we have this done, I'm going to select this and just delete it. So we have this object now cut out. So if I go back to the right view, we want to go back to the top and turn on our all refs group. You can see we're matching that up quite closely. Obviously we're going to have to come in and bevel some edges in a little bit, but for now that bit is looking pretty good. Now over here we also have a circle So we're going to do exactly the same thing just here. So I'm going to show our mesh layer again, and I'm going to delete the circle that is currently in there. So I'm going to activate the mesh layer, lasso select around all of those polys, and hit delete to get rid of them. Now with the mesh layer still selected, I'm going to come to the basic tab and draw out a new cylinder. So click and drag. I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger, and because it's a bit bigger, we're going to up the size slightly. I'm actually going to up that to, say, 20. I think 20 looks pretty good. So space to drop the tool when you're happy, and we're going to do exactly the same thing as we just did. Now I'm going to move this out in front slightly, X to extrude and move it through the model, and then with our scissors layer active, I'm going to come to the mesh edit tab and go to the solid drill. Now when we stencil this time, you'll notice something a little bit different. Now notice right now our cutting layer is in the middle of this giant n-gon. There are no edges connecting this circle to the outside of this scissors object. Now when we click stencil and hit OK, it automatically has to add in at least one edge, so that if I hide the mesh layer, this new polygon and this new set of edge is at least connected to one part of this outer mesh. So it will automatically add that edge in for you unless you create it before you do the stencil. But this is fine, it's connected it to a nice place for us, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now with that done, I'm going to select the circle and just delete it exactly like before. So if I go back to the right view, we now have everything in place so that we can go in and add in some width. Now if I go to a top view, you'll see that we actually have another reference image here, and you can see that our scissors shape is not so uniform. What we're going to do is basically move this to the side, so right to the left side, like so, the kind of straight side of this object, like that, and then going to hit X for extrude, right click, and we're going to drag it out to there. So just drag it out to this kind of right side of the blade section of this mesh. So like that, and then I'm going to go to perspective mode, just take a look at what we've got. Okay, now we are sloping out at around this point to about this point. So I want to find out where these points are on the model, and you can see they're kind of here. Now right now there's no way that we're going to get a smooth kind of transition between this area and this area because there are no cuts running vertically down the model. So I'm going to go in and add those in, and you'll see in a second just how helpful this is. So what I'm going to do is basically with the slice tool, I'm just going to add in a slice just above that vertice there, like so. And I had this edge loop selected, so that was completely worthwhile. So I'm going to deselect this edge loop and find out where we're cutting from again. So we're cutting from here to here, so I'm going to do it in the top view actually. I'm going to basically, with the slice tool, cut across like that, but with the right angle snap turned on. Then I'm going to do the same thing just there, like that. And if I go back to perspective, you'll see that we now have these two cuts down the side here. And these are going to help us create the nice transition towards the back part of the scissors object. So what I'm going to do is select all of the relevant vertices. So I'm just going to grab this guy and click convert by holding down Alt, convert that to vertices so I know where I'm connecting from. And I'm just going to select all the rest of these guys, like so. Now we're going to use a fall off. So with the vertices that you want to work on selected, I'm going to come up here to the fall off menu and click linear. Now I've covered fall offs in my previous tutorial, but essentially if you click and drag, when you're set to linear fall off with a shape preset of linear, you end up with this cone shape. Now it's basically a multiplier for whatever you do to these verts. The thin end, where it's basically 0, you have a 0% multiplier. So say I was to try and move these verts here 1 centimeter to the right. It would be 1 centimeter times 0%, so it wouldn't move at all. However, these verts move the same 1 centimeter, get 100%, so they would move the full distance. And in between, you get a basic fall off, so the ones in the middle move 50%, a bit close to this end is 25%, that kind of thing. It's very obvious once you start to move things. So basically I'm going to grab this guy and move it so that if I go to perspective, it's in line. I'll actually go to a right view, and it's going to be in line with that cut there. I'm just going to move this one back slightly. And if I go to a top view, activate the move tool with the W key and pull this out, you'll see that we start getting that nice transition here, and then everything past this point is moving 100%. So this is all keeping nice and straight down here, which is pretty much what we want. So that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go up and turn off the fall off by clicking none. With that done, we can take a look at our mesh. And things are actually looking pretty good right now. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to come up and save our scene. So save as, we'll call it 8 scissors start, and save. Now before we start adding bevels to our object, there's one final thing that I want to do, and that's to actually create the blade. Now to do that, we're going to move this edge down slightly. So I'm going to activate the move tool, pull it down about 600 over here, and then we're going to grab this vert and move it in, so along on the z-axis. And what you'll notice is that these two are very close together. So once we get this into position, like so, I'm going to grab this guy, shift click this guy, and then go to vertex and join. And we're just going to join those two together. Now this does give us a try at the very end here, but that's perfectly okay. We can bevel that anyway, so things are looking pretty good. We can now go around and bevel all of our edges, and then add an inset, and then we'll be adding in some quad polygons. So we're now going to go in and bevel all of the edges on the model. So it's basically all of the hard edges that make up the outsides. We're going to also go into here and bevel these ones as well. So it's basically, you know, your normal bevels really, these guys as well. And I'm going to do that and come back once it's done. Okay, so with our bevels in place, we now have some really nasty smoothing errors going on. So we're going to go in and start cutting things up into quads. Now I just want to point out this bit here. Now we have this circle, but we don't have the row of polygons surrounding it that I kind of like to have with this kind of thing. So what we're going to do is draw an edge from the bottom of this blade section here, all the way around the bottom of the model, and then up to the corner on the other side. Then we can go in and get rid of both of these sides here. I'm going to grab both outer edge loops on this hole, hit Z for the edge extend, right click, and then we're going to scale it out using this red circle. And that's going to give us those extra edges that surround this. With that done, we can quickly come up, select these two edges and hit bridge in the edge menu. Do the same on this side, and bridge, and then we can select both of these edge loops and hit P to fill them in. Now we're free to go about splitting them up into quads and tries as needs be. Now I'm going to do that for the entire mesh and come back once it's done. Now with everything turned to quad, we're getting a couple of nasty smoothing errors still. So what we're going to do is grab all of the side polygons and we're going to add an inset to our model. So I'm going to grab all of these guys. Now we're going to go in and get all these little ones as well, but to a point. I think I'm going to miss out these ones and miss out these ones as well, and that's purely because by the time we inset them, they're going to be so overlapped that it won't be worth doing really. So we're just going to save ourselves a little bit of hassle and just miss them out, I think. So carry on going, go all the way around here. All of these guys, we will get these guys, and the back of the knife, like so. Then we're going to hit B, right click, and we're going to inset this slightly, so about that much. With that done, we lose all of our shading errors, and I'm just going to check, but I'm pretty sure everything will work out quite nicely as well. Yep, everything seems pretty good. This is perhaps a little messy around here. What I might do is take these edges away, like so, and perhaps try and recut it, something like that, just down, and then get rid of these guys and move those up like so. And then we can kind of add in a try down there or something, and that looks a little bit cleaner in there. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. Basically remove these edges surrounding that circle and that guy as well, and then we can just pull that up to there, and we can get rid of that one and maybe that one as well, and we'll pull that down into, no we won't, where will we take that one? Let's think, there, no, there I suppose, and then we'll pull this into a try. So it's not the prettiest of meshes, but it does work, and because we've added in this outline, it's not going to have any smoothing errors on it either. So that looks pretty good, and in fact, now that everything's beveled and inset, this part of the model is now completed. So we're going to move on to looking at the scissors all mesh. So I'm going to highlight that and go back into a right view. Now I'm going to quickly get rid of our mesh layer, so I'm going to select that guy and delete it, and I'm going to create a new item which I'm going to rename to scissors 2. I'm just going to drag that down into top tools. Now our scissors 2 object, I'm just going to hide our scissors 1 just to make it a little bit easier to see, is basically this handle here. It comes up here, has another blade, then comes to about this point, down, over, and back into the handle. So it's a much less complex object, this. So I'm going to come up to the basic tab and click on the pen tool, and we're just going to rough out this model. So I'm going to put a point there and there. I'm going to put one about there, and we're just going to follow up to around about the end over here, like so. Move that maybe a little bit to the right, just so we can follow that reference image as best as possible. Now with this guy here, I'm going to put another point there, one down there, and one there. And that, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, sorry, and then we can just tweak these a little tiny bit. Now first of all, I'm going to bevel this one, so I'm going to hit B, right click, and bevel it in slightly. And that actually worked very well, which is great. I'm going to bevel this guy, so select that one and B to bevel, and that one worked almost as well, which is pretty good. So I'm quite happy with that. We've got a bevel here, so I'm going to select this one and hit B, right click, and bevel that together. This isn't a bevel, this isn't a bevel, so we've only got this one left. So I'm going to select this guy, right click, and bevel it out, probably with a round level of 3 on that one. I'm going to make it even, make it match the red version as well, so something like that looks pretty good to me. So with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. We can go to perspective mode and take a look at what we've got. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. That came about pretty quickly. Now I'm going to go to the top view. We need to move it into position. So I'm going to select this, and it's quite obvious to see where this one goes. I'm going to move it right into the center, like so. Then X for extrude and pull it out to the side. With that done, we're going to come in and add in the blade. So I'm going to grab this edge here. I'm going to move it up 600. So there you go. We're then going to grab this end vert and move it in. So we want to match that curve like that, and now we have blades on both of these guys, which is exactly what we want. We have a bit of an issue going on here, but that's purely because this is a giant n-gon. If I was to come in with the slice tool and add an edge from there into there, you'll notice that that disappears. So that's a problem that will be resolved when we make this into quads shortly. In fact, something that we're going to do right now. So we're going to go about the beveling procedure, and then we're going to split it all up into quads. So first of all, I'm going to select these outer polygons. I'm going to come up holding down shift, click on the plus bounds, and then going to come in and select the edges that we might have missed. So these guys in here, and this end one, and that's it. I'm then going to hit B for bevel, right click, and we're going to bevel these out a little way, like so. We've got a little bit of an issue going on there, so I'm just going to grab that vert and not the other side, just this one. I'm just going to pull that down ever so slightly. Just a little issue going on there. Now as you can see, we have a couple of these shading errors going on, so we're going to inset the side polygons. Remember, we've got 2 on this side. So with those 3 polygons selected, I'm going to hit B for bevel, right click, and we're just going to inset both of these ever so slightly. Now with that done, you can come down and just check that everything is nice and neatly joined up. We don't have any overlapping verts at all. It doesn't look like we do. So now what we're going to do is go in and convert these into quads. So I'm going to do that and I'll come right back. So as you can see, everything is now split up into quads, but I'm just going to make one more quick change. If I go into a right view, you'll see that we're going to have to add in this hinge object, and these edges are currently running perhaps a little bit too close to it. So we're going to redirect these up over the top of the object. So I'm going to go back to perspective, and using the edge slice tool, I'm just going to add in an extra set of edges that run right across the top of our scissors object. I missed one there, so I'm just going to undo a couple times and get back down and then drag it down this edge, and then I can grab this edge on this side, this edge on this side, and hit the backspace key. We end up with a 5-sided polygon on each side, but considering we're going to have to add in the hinge object anyway, we'll have to split this up a little bit further after that. So, saying that, I'm going to go into the scissors object layer and turn it on. I'm going to turn off our scissors 2 layer temporarily. Now if we go into a right view, obviously this hinge is in the same position, we're just going to have to move it on the x-axis slightly. So I'm going to go into poly mode and select all of these guys, Control C to copy them, go back into the scissors 2 layer, turn off our scissors layer and hit Control V to paste those in. Now obviously these 2 objects are slightly offset, so we're going to have to move this into position. So I'm going to go into a top view and I'm going to move this like that. So we line up one side with the outer edge of our scissors object. Then I'm going to lasso select these verts and move these into position on this other side. Zoom in really close if you want. So something like that looks pretty good. Go back to perspective. I'm then going to delete both of these giant polygons, and we can go about kind of connecting these guys together. Now at the moment there's no real obvious polygons to connect, so I'm just going to come in and connect these 2 up. So go to the edge menu, bridge, and right click, then double click that loop and hit P, and then we can go in and with the edge slice tool start cutting these up into quads, and then obviously do the same on the other side as well. So select 2 edges you think should line up. In the edge menu, click bridge and right click, fill in the gap, and then with the edge slice tool just go around and fill these all in as quads. So I'm going to do that and come right back. So as you can see, everything is now quadded up. I'm just going to add in one extra edge loop on this top section here so we can make a triangular quad on either side, which will finish this off nicely. So with an edge selected, I'm going to hit Alt C, right click, and I'll just put an edge in there at 50%. Space to drop the tool, and then with the edge slice tool I'm just going to draw in a triangular quad like that. And one on the other side, like that. And then if we come down to the statistics panel, polygons by vertex, you'll see we've got no polygons with more than 4 verts. So we can bring back our scissors layer, and we should be able to see right through that hole. So we're going to add in the hinge in a second, and those 2 objects are now pretty much done. So we're now going to create the simple hinge object that runs through both of these scissors objects. And to do that I'm going to select both scissors and scissors 1 by holding down shift. I'm going to select 2 polys in this loop, so on the outer bevel of the object, and hit L. I'll then come to the other object and do the same thing, so holding down shift I'm going to select 2 next to each other and hit L. I'm then going to copy these, so Control C. I'll create a new mesh item and drag it into the top tools group and then rename it to hinge. And I'm going to hit Control V to paste that together. Then I can hide scissors 2 and scissors to take a look at what we've got. Now currently both of these loops are facing inwards, so we need to flip them around with the F key. I'm then going to bridge both of these inner edge loops by double clicking them, and then coming up to the edge menu, clicking bridge and right clicking, and then going to fill both of these back polygons by double clicking the edge loop and hitting the P key. Now with this edge loop selected, I'm going to select the other one as well, and hit B on my keyboard, and we're just going to drag out a very slight edge bevel like that. And then finally we're just going to take care of these n-gons by selecting both of them and insetting slightly like that. Then shift clicking and insetting a little bit more. And then I'm going to grab this end one, come to vertex, join averaged, and then do the same on the other side as well. So what we have here is the hinge object that's going to run through both of our scissors. However, if we bring our scissors back at the moment, you'll see that it's basically right up against the scissors object, so we need to scale this down slightly. So I'm going to grab it, R for scale, and we're going to use the red circle that you can see here. And if I scale down ever so slightly, you'll see that we leave a slight gap between both of these objects. Now I'm also going to scale it out slightly on the x-axis, just a little bit like that, so it pushes slightly outside the scissors group. And that is our hinge done. The final thing that we have to make on the scissors object is this little kind of springy bit of metal thing that kind of goes in here, and it's essentially what the green handle pushes up against to close the scissors. So we're going to go in and make this. I'm going to start by creating a new mesh layer, renaming it to spring, if I could spell, and I'm going to bring that up into the top tools group. Now we're going to use the inner polygons of this loop here. So we're going to select the scissors object. I'm going to select a couple of these polygons, so not all of them, but just these guys. So just the ones directly in this circle here. I'm going to hit Control C to copy and Control V to paste them into the spring layer, and then we can hide all of our other scissors objects. I'm going to go back into a right view and zoom out slightly to take a look at what we've got. Now we need to scale this down ever so slightly, so I'm going to grab them with the scale tool. Again, I'm going to hit the red X just to make them a little bit smaller so we get a gap between this bit of metal and the scissors object. I'm then going to select with the in edges mode, this end edge here, and with the edge extend tool I'm going to start moving this out. So I'm going to activate the edge extend, right click, then go to the move tool and move the new edge out slightly. We're going to move it out to this corner here. I'll then do the same thing, so edge extend, right click, activate the move tool. We're going to pull this out. And essentially, actually we might add an extra edge just there, I think, on this one. So then repeat, edge extend, right click and move, and we're just going to do this all the way around the model, or at least on this outer edge. And then we're going to use another new tool in Modo called the thicken tool. And that's going to help us kind of extrude it whilst maintaining the shape that we have here. It's a very useful tool actually. So we just continue around, so edge extend, and I'm just going to speed this bit up until I get to the end. Okay, so as you can see, I've extended that edge all the way around the outer side of this metal object. I've brought us right up to this end section here. So then it's just a case of going in and adding in our bevels. Now it's always a good idea to add in the bevels before you do the thicken, otherwise things can get a little bit crunched up when you start kind of adding the thickness to this model. Now I'm going to up the round level to 2 for this one. Now remember, this is going to be very small on the final object, so we don't need the resolution too high, but 2 seems to be good enough for this section. I'm then going to grab all of these edges in here, so these 3, and bevel with a round level of 1. So right click and drag out an edge bevel, like that. I'll then do the same thing on this one, so this is going to have a round level of 1, like that. So you want this one to be a little tighter perhaps, so about there looks pretty good. And then finally this one here, we're going to bevel the round level of 2, I think, for that one, just to give that a nice curve. And those are our bevels done. So we can now go ahead and use the thicken tool. And that's found over here in the polygon menu in this top section, so it's the 4th one down. Now the thicken tool is kind of a bit like the extrude tool and a bit like the bevel tool. It's kind of a combination of the both. Now if I was to grab all of the polygons that we have, hit X for the extrude tool and right click, if I was to move them, we're not kind of taking into account the normals of these polygons. And the normals is essentially the way they're facing. When we use the extrude tool, we kind of have a single direction we can move these polygons in. With the thicken tool, however, so with all of these polygons selected, I'm going to select thicken and right click. If I was to move this arrow that appears with the thicken tool, take a look at what happens to our model. We still get this extruded distance here, but it's taking into account the direction that these polygons are facing in. So it's a bit like the bevel tool in that respect. So what we can do is just pull this arrow until we get the correct thickness to match the ref. And with that done, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool and go into perspective mode. We can now quickly come in and grab these edges, and we're going to add a slight bevel to these guys. So I'm just going to grab the ones we've missed at the very ends. Like that. B for bevel, right click, and with the round level set to 0, I'm just going to pull out a very slight edge bevel, like that. And that is the spring done. So what we can do now is bring back our hinge, scissors 2 and scissors objects. I'm going to select all 4 of those meshes, and I'm going to hit Ctrl G and group them into a single scissors group and hit OK. So those are all of our top tools done. So now I'm going to bring back all of the other ones in that group and close that guy up. I'll then bring back our bottom tools. So you've got those guys as well. And then we can bring back our other layers. So if we take a look at what we've got, if I turn off shaded visibility options, show vertices, you can see that our penknife is very nearly complete. There's a couple extra things that we have to add in. Now first of all, I'm going to come up to this main sight plate, and if I hit 5 on my keyboard to switch to items mode, we'll select the current mesh layer in the viewport so it turns yellow. Now remember at the very start when we made this object we said we'd mirror it over at the very end, so we're going to do that now. So I'm going to select these polygons, I'm going to come up to duplicate, mirror, and we're mirroring it across the x-axis, so this is actually set up OK. So I'm just going to hit apply, and that gets mirrored over to this side as well. In the main segments we also have this plate in here, which we said we would mirror to the other side. So with that selected, I'm going to go to mirror in the duplicate menu, and with the axes set to X, I'm going to hit apply there as well. So now we have all of the plates, all of the segments, and all of the tools in our Swiss Army knife model. Now the final thing we have to add in is this green object here that I accidentally missed out earlier. So I'm going to create a new item. I'm going to rename it to keyring underscore ring. And with that selected, I'm going to zoom in on this object. Now this is in the set 2 refs group, which I've activated, and I've also turned off our set 4 refs. Now we're going to be using the same technique to create this as we did to create the corkscrew earlier. So it's a combination of SDS, subdivision surface modeling, and the radial sweep tool. Now the first step of this was to go to the basic tab, and with the cylinder tool we're going to create a circle that matches the width and height of this green object. So I think maybe that's a little big, so I'm going to change both of these radiuses to 240 and hit enter. So we want both of those to be the same, and for the sides we want it to be as low as possible whilst maintaining the minimal amount of detail that we need. So because this is such a small object, 6 sides is fine. So when you're happy, I'm going to hit space to drop the tool, then I'm going to come up to the duplicate tab and click on the radial sweep option. Now remember, with the radial sweep we need to right click in the middle of this object. So I'm going to right click maybe just about there, and what I'm looking for is that the very left side of this new disk that we've just created matches the very left side of this reference image, and that looks actually pretty close, so I'm going to leave that as is. But obviously this is rotating in the wrong axis. This is rotating around the X axis. We want it to rotate up and down, so along the Y. So I'm going to change this to Y. And we end up with this tube here. So this is a circle running in the y-axis. Now how many turns do we have in this keyring? We have probably about, I reckon, about 2 and a bit. So I'm going to make 720, which is 2, and then we're going to up it to say 800, I think. Should be good. Now we need to offset it slightly. So what I'm going to do is drag this down, and what I'm looking for are for these end circles to be just on top of each other, really. We don't want these end circles to overlap at all, so we can afford to go back a little bit maybe. So like that. So I'm just looking for this point here and this point here to be roughly the same position. We don't want them to overlap on the y-axis. And when you're happy with that, you can hit space to drop the tool. I'm going to go up. Now these polygons are flipped the wrong way, so I'm going to hit F on my keyboard to flip them back round, and then hit Tab to go into subdivision surface mode, and you can see that things are already looking pretty good. We just have to take care of these ends. So I'm going to grab both of these end polygons. I'm going to hit B for bevel and right click. I'm going to shift them out slightly. Then I'm going to shift click and inset slightly like that. And then I'm going to hit space to drop the tool. Go out of subdivision surface mode, remembering to deselect these polygons before you do that. And then we're going to come in and split these end-gons up into two quads by drawing a line straight down the middle like that. So I'll do the same on the other one down here. So we're going to add in one line down the middle and go back to subdivision surface mode. Now this is looking great except for these edges, which are slightly moving outside of this circle area here. So we're going to grab them and move them back. So I'm going to select these very two end polygons, hold down shift and hit up once and twice on my keyboard to select this end section, and then I'm just going to activate the move tool and pull this in on the X axis like that. Then we'll do the same thing for these guys. So I'm going to select both of these end polygons, hold down shift and hit up twice to select the next two loops, activate the move tool, and then move this in on the Z. And with that done, our keyring ring is completed, and that means that our entire Swiss Army knife object is now complete. Now at the start I said I'd give a very brief look at how you might animate this object. So first of all I'm going to go into items mode by either hitting 5 on your keyboard or clicking the items menu up here. I've also turned off our main side plate. Now if I was to select, say, the knife object in our viewport, and in items mode any selected items turn yellow. And remember, when you're animating, you're going to be animating these items, so you want to make sure that you're in items mode. Now with the knife item selected, if I activate the rotate tool with E and rotate, you'll see that it's actually rotating around a point in the middle of the model, not at this end section where we want it to actually rotate. So why is that happening? Well, each of these mesh items has a set pivot point, the point in the scene where it will rotate around, and you can actually set this pivot point by coming up here to the items menu, holding down the left mouse button and selecting pivot. Another way would be hitting the 6 key on your keyboard. Now when you do either of those things, you get this little black and white circle in the viewport, and this is the mesh item's pivot point. So we currently have the knife layer selected, so this is the knife layer's pivot point. Now what you can do is grab this by clicking on it, and just using the normal move tool, we could move it to wherever we want it to be in the scene. So I'm going to go to a right view, and we're going to move it right back to the middle of this cylinder here. So I'm going to grab this red circle, I'm going to move this right into the middle of this cylinder. Now when you're happy, which I almost am, like that, you can hit space to drop the tool and hit 5 to go back to items mode. If I go back to perspective and now rotate the knife, you'll see the rotate gimbal now appears around that pivot point, and if we rotate it, it rotates out of the knife as we would expect. So the first thing would be to move the pivot points for all of these mesh items to where they need to be. So for the top tools, all of them need to be at this cylinder, except for the bottle opener, which needs to be at this far left one. For the bottom tools, all of the pivot points are on this bottom cylinder here. And once your pivots are moved into place, it's just a case of rotating the individual items around into position. So you could set up a product shot like this. Now I'm not going to cover keyframe animation in this tutorial, I'll save that for a later one. However, if you go to Google and type in Luxology space TV and hit enter, you'll come up with the repository of Luxology tutorials, and there's a ton over there. They're extremely useful and really good for kind of getting involved with the animation side of things. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial. It was a little longer than expected, but I hope it was fun. I didn't really want to miss out any of the crucial bits, and although we ended up going over a lot of the same things again and again, I think it's important to see, you know, the mistakes that I make and how you get out of them, and how you know that the mesh is going wrong in certain places and things like that. So let me know what you think. You know, leave me comments below. If you've got any questions or anything like that, you know, if I skipped over things a little bit quickly, just give me a shout below and I'll try and get back to you ASAP. You can also follow me on Twitter. I am BadGranola, that's BADGRENOLA, and you can contact me on there and, you know, ask me some questions, and again I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Apologies for the slight delay in the second part of this. I had a couple of work commitments that got in the way, but we finally got it done. I hope it was fun, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks very much.